Presiding Officer. In rising to close this debate for Scottish Labour, I want to genuinely recognise the outstanding work done by everyone working in our NHS. Staff who go out every single day onto the front line to look after all of us. Staff whom we clap for every week during the pandemic, who now feel dejected, burnt out and undervalued by this SNP government. The NHS is this country's greatest institution, realised by a Labour government who rebuilt this country from the ashes of war. And let me say to Gillian Martin and others, I share their anger over the Tories' economic policies, which is why we need a Labour government across the UK with the plan outlined by Keir Starmer this week in Liverpool to reverse the economic disaster created by the Tories. And when Carol Mockin answered the Cabinet Secretary said that it was embarrassing. I'll tell the Cabinet Secretary what's embarrassing. That in my lifetime, I have never seen the NHS in Scotland so unwell. That I have never seen the people who work in it so demoralised. That I have never seen people languishing on waiting lists and in A&E departments in the current state that they are. So the Cabinet Secretary should be embarrassed by that. Many of those people who work in our NHS are our friends, our family and our neighbours. People who love the bones of an NHS but are totally broken, because that is what 15 years of SNP mismanagement and a record of failure has done, as outlined by my colleague Jackie Bailey in her opening remarks. This is at the door of the Cabinet Secretary. I would like to make some progress. The Cabinet Secretary has been in post for almost 500 days. And people say he's missing in action. But he's not even missing in action, he's just missing. So it's time for him to own his record. He must listen and engage with what staff are telling him. In his contribution, he said that we should be grateful that 2-year waits have been eradicated. Is that the sum total of his ambition for the NHS? Is that what he stands behind? This week, it was revealed that hundreds of surge beds, which were made available last winter to cope with additional patient numbers, are still occupied. So let's reflect on the view of doctors working in our NHS, as highlighted by Alex Cole-Hamilton and others. John Paul Loughrey, the Vice President of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine in Scotland, has said that the latest delays could lead to 40 deaths in the following 30 days. And he said, and I quote, "Every hospital in Scotland just now is under the cosh." Just last week, as we've heard before, 1,200 people spent more than 12 hours waiting in emergency departments and hospitals across Scotland. And it's worth hearing that again, because we need to let it sink in, because that is the reality in our hospitals right now. And we know that part of the solution to getting people out of hospital requires well-supported and well-valued social care. Presiding Officer, actions. I'll give way to Emma Harper.
Emma Harper.
I really appreciate you giving way. It's just on that point, it's about the issues are really complicated. We heard yesterday at committee from the Chief Executive of NHS Dumfries and Galloway, who said Brexit was a part of the problem for the recruitment as well. So would you acknowledge that the Chief Exec of NHS D&G said that?
Paul O'Kane.
Of course I would acknowledge that Brexit is part of it. But what we hear from the government is excuse after excuse. So if it's not the pandemic, it's Brexit. If it's not Brexit, it's how we heat care homes. If it's not that, it's procurement. Excuse, excuse, excuse. Where are the solutions? Presiding Officer, actions speak louder than words. And if this SNP and Green government respected care workers, they would offer them more than the derisory pay rise they were offered. Our care workers deserve better, and that's why Scottish Labour has called consistently for care workers to receive an immediate rise to £15 an hour. NHS staff are working tirelessly to provide exceptional care, but they are being let down by the inaction of this government and this Cabinet Secretary. The SNP cannot shirk responsibility for the current crisis. What I noticed was many SNP backbenchers didn't even want to mention the NHS that their party is responsible for, because the crisis is a result of 15 years of sustained failure by this government, a government that's out of touch, out of ideas and unwilling to take responsibility. And I challenge the Cabinet Secretary to step up, show leadership and do whatever is necessary to avert a coming humanitarian crisis in our hospitals this winter. Thank you, Presiding Officer.